to talk to you a little bit about how we make sense of the world, the modern world that we're living in today. There's many areas that we can go into, but one of the key areas I'd like to start with is social media. Because there's no doubt that, I mean, in the last, it's not even 10 years, 5 years, I mean, it's just changing the whole time. There's no doubt that social media has transformed many areas of human interaction, human relationships, and also just on a personal level, self-esteem. It affects people's perception of how they look at themselves, how they think the world is perceiving them. I don't really have a specific question to give you here, but can you just kind of talk to us about how the world of social media has changed the world, and perhaps if there's any Jewish insight that can tie into this. I've got a tall order for you, but let's see if we can get somewhere with this.
Let's see what we can do with that,
yeah.
Ali. Look, I think that when we look at humanity, there are always constants in human beings. And the question is, where do we embed those constants? So questions of self-esteem, questions of recognition, questions of communication have always been questions that humanity has dealt with, both in the positive and in the negative. What we're seeing with the development of social media is almost an explosion of interconnection. So I suddenly see my life, or there's an ability for me to see myself embedded in a mass of people at the click of a button, what have you. Yeah. So that's something that we have never dealt with in humanity on such a scale. I think that that's the major question as to, what do we do with this? So on some levels, it's very positive, because I'm able to present ideas to numbers of people or to multitudes in ways that were almost impossible for us to do. I mean, this program, right, the way that we present, the way that you're presenting, which is phenomenal, you don't have to go to broadcasters, you don't have to speak to executives and so on. You can say, this is what I'd like to do. If I get the people to help me out, I'm putting it out there. So that's a miracle. Right. It's miraculous to be able to do that. The issue with it is that there are no regulations, really. And so it really requires us to look at our own capacity for self-regulation. And many of us are not adept at self-regulating in an excellent fashion. I would say that close to all of us are not excellent at self-regulating. We love regulating other people, but regulating ourselves, we're not always so strong on. And so these questions that were always questions about self-esteem. How do I measure myself? How do I view myself and my self-worth? The question of being able to have a strong core identity in and of myself, as opposed to defining myself by the way that others see me, is age-old. It's something that humanity has grappled with forever. You will see every wise person speak something to that throughout the ages. But when you embed that in an explosive setting, so to speak, and where I now have my presence on Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or what have you, and there are thousands of people, literally thousands of people that are viewing my output and are able to comment, like, recognize, not recognize.
And everyone else can see it.
And everyone else can see what those recognitions are. It is immensely difficult not to measure oneself in those terms. So if I put something out on Facebook, and I first have to recognize that I'm speaking not to a room of 10 people, not to a room of hundreds of people. I'm talking to thousands of people. Everything that I put out is immensely public. And then it starts coming back in terms of, well, do they recognize it? Am I recognized? Did my statement mean something to someone? Those things run so deep in terms of our core, of our self-worth and our self-understanding, that we can't help but begin to define ourselves in terms of that community or that setting, those responses. And so that's worrying. It's worrying. So on the one hand, the communication is a miracle. It's phenomenal. We don't want to go back in the bottle with this one, right? We don't want to remove it. But because we're still at the beginnings of it, we are finding that we need to discover ways of genuinely measuring and communicating to a human being how I find my self-worth, or how you find your self-worth, right, in this setting. Because
what are we being told is valuable? It makes us worth.
What we're essentially
something
being
that is
told
wrong.
is valuable is whatever's recognized and liked en masse. I mean, that's genuinely the message. So
Yeah.
should I change my profile picture with everyone else, or shouldn't I? Well, I mean, how will I be seen if I don't change my profile picture? Oh, if I don't change my profile picture, is that a statement that's too bold or not? These are things that literally people are grappling with on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, if at all they're grappling, right? If they're not just simply running with the trend and changing the picture, or posting the same post that people have posted
And do you
several
think most
times.
people are in that category?
We can't help but be in that category, because it is in human nature to find tribal acceptance. It's old, Ali. It goes way back to be able to find. We're social animals. We find our capacity to be secure and accepted. We crave and require love and belonging.
But has social media made the problem worse?
Social media has upped the ante.
It's up the ante.
Yeah. So it doesn't mean that we don't address it in the same fashion. We will still speak to people to enhance their self-worth, or to recognize where it is that their self-worth comes from in the same way. But we recognize that what they're dealing with is a very instant, very broad responsiveness that is something that we haven't had before. And so we have to tweak, our approaches, and recognize the reality and the imminence of the reality that we're living in, because the majority of our reality is virtual today. Yeah, and it's to say that it's not real is shirking the issue. It is very real. These are real people out there that are clicking like. You know that they did it. Yeah, you see that they took a minute to think about what you put out there and actually responded to it. Yeah. So it's
Rabbi,
immense.
What is the Jewish remedy for this, if there is one? Because wanting to be accepted seems like a very legitimate kind of feeling, emotion to have. Is there a right way that this can be done? Should we say, you've got to stop caring about what other people think, stop craving other people's acceptance, or is there a middle path? How does this work?
It's easier said than done to tell somebody you have to stop worrying about what people think of you. I mean, this is hardwired. All of us are hardwired for love and belonging, and rightfully so. I mean, that's what we are. We're social animals. But as a result of that, we will again look for our value externally. So it's not something that we can simply fix by a sit down and a talk and say, listen, you really need to start valuing yourself more. I mean, this is stuff that genuinely begins from childhood. And as a community, we first need to recognize that this is a serious problem. It is, in my mind, one of the most serious problems, not only in humanity, but certainly in our communities,
I agree.
and where our children are growing up in these spaces. These are real spaces. Their entire psychology is being developed within these spaces. And so what is important for us to do is to focus on the value of raising children with strong self-worth. And that means helping parents do that, because who said that the parents grew up with strong self-worth? Who said that the parents know how to do this? Yeah, so much occurs in childhood. So Torah tells us, I mean, the first thing that God says to Avraham is, Avraham, lech lecha, go for you. Rashi says, letovatcha lehanatcha, for your good, for your enjoyment. The first thing that God asks Avraham to do is for himself. That is the cornerstone of Jewish thought. It is the beginnings of all that we are in Judaism. So how do we do that for our children? How do we make sure that our schools are not cutting away or bringing down a child's natural sense of self-worth? That we're not, in the way that we reprimand children, the way that we give tasks to children, the way that we speak of their work and the things that they put out. When your child walks in the room, do your eyes light up? These questions are the most important questions that we can ask ourselves, because it is the very foundation that all else is built on. If I don't have a sense of self, genuinely, that comes from my inside, from my very spirit that God gave me, my soul, if you will, I can't build on anything.
Does God play a critical role here? Do you think, or is the Jewish view that real self-esteem can only truly come when you believe that you have a creator that placed you here on this earth for a reason, you have inherent value because of that.
Well, it certainly doesn't hurt, Ali. Yeah, I mean,
But I'm asking, is it essential?
Look, when we understand that we are not just our bodies, that there is a human spirit that fills us, that is individual. Each one has a unique spirit that contributes something unique to this world. And that is God's gift to us, right? That God gives us that. And the way that the Torah presents it is that it is His breath. You don't get more intimate than that. That God blew breath of life into the nostrils of a human being. That is our source of life and value. To know that, to recognize that, to understand that, it changes our ability to live a full and valued life.
So you think it is
essential?
essential?
I think it's essential. I think it's essential. Yeah, and we see source for that throughout the Torah.